Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anybody that wants to start, develop, or further a solo performing career. I've got over 50 years of experience of doing just that, and I'll not only include my tips, but the tips from other working professionals in their neck of the woods. The hope and purpose of this is to make this actionable, fun, and actually profitable to help you actually make money with your music. How great would that be? Without further ado, let's get going. Today, I have a lady that I'm very excited to talk to on a variety of levels, the multi-talented Alice Osborn.
Yay. Great to be here.
Welcome, Alice.
Thank you.
So this came about with an interview, a podcast I did with one of my former guitar students named Mike Swinarski. And it sounds like you and I might have been in Raleigh at the same time, but a different time. So what I'd like to do is kind of go back to the very beginning. I know in terms of music, you got kind of an early start, didn't you?
Yeah, so I started playing flute when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was in the middle school band. And then I just got more into my, studies and everything, and didn't feel encouraged by teachers or coaches or my parents at all. And I dropped out of the music stuff. It was probably not until Myrtle Beach. I moved to Myrtle Beach in the late 90s, and I started singing karaoke and getting pretty serious about it and trying to figure out, because I've always loved to sing since I was born. And then so the singing came first, and then years, let's see, I would say probably 2011, 2012 was when I took my first real singing lesson. And then I had laryngitis, and I bought a guitar. And then instead of singing with the teacher and skipping the lesson, we learned guitar. And then he was my first teacher. His name was Dave. And then I had another teacher, another teacher, another teacher. And now I'm here. I'm in Lake Tahoe, California, and I wouldn't be here without the music. And I'm glad I didn't give up.
That's so there's several things that I want to go back and revisit. You said you didn't get a lot of encouragement from your parents, right?
No.
Now, if I'm probably a little older than you, I'm in my late 60s now, but I remember having probably when I was in fourth grade, just a general music kind of a class. And I enjoyed that. I sang. I grew up in the Baptist church, so my parents went to church and I sang. And anyway, when I got started getting serious with guitar, my parents were a little frustrated and annoyed with that. So it sounds like maybe that's something you could relate to as well. You said you sung a lot and you started playing flute when you were younger, but you play a variety of instruments. Where did all of that come from?
Midlife crisis. So I was, yeah, I felt like I wanted to do everything before, I don't know, I got too old or something. I just fell into it. So it was first the guitar, and then I said, "Hey, I want to learn violin." And then I found a violin teacher just at this random meet and greet that was a lunchtime thing, and it was so random, it had to be right. And then I met and then a couple of years later I started banjo and then mandolin and Irish dancing all at the same time, and it all really flowed together. And I was the really one of the few adults in Irish dancing, so my kids were the ones taking the pictures instead of the other way around. Usually behind the barriers, it was the parents taking pictures of the kids, but my kids were taking pictures of me.
I was going to say this is incredibly interesting. You know, all of the fretted instruments I can understand that I can play a little bit of mandolin and I play bass and all that. But going from guitar to violin, that is such a treacherous instrument in terms of pitches and stuff. How in the world did you manage that?
I had pretty patient teachers, and then I started the ukulele last year because I worked for Sam Ash, and they needed a ukulele teacher. And I said, well, I never touched a ukulele before in my life, but I figured I could do it because I have experience with the other instruments. And so I bought a ukulele. I think the ukulele lesson was on Wednesday and this was Monday. So I bought a ukulele, got a book, figured out some basic chords, and then taught the lesson on Wednesday. And now I teach ukulele to third graders. I'm I'm a professional ukulele teacher now, but I just started a year ago, and it was. But that's what I do. I like to do things before I'm really ready for them anyway, and that's how I started with guitar. I wasn't ready. I didn't know anything, and I plunged right in. Probably burned some bridges because people thought, oh, she's incompetent, but and not very good. But I kept going. I said, well, I just don't. I'm not a person that has to keep going and keep practicing and practicing till I'm ready. I mean, practicing, you know what I mean. I sometimes I do things before I'm ready.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of benefit to that. My first professional band I joined a month after I was 18 years of age was one of the biggest bands in the Southeast at the time,
Hmm.
and I probably wasn't ready for that. I could play great solos, but my time was terrible, and I had to work on a lot of things. But I think it was really good because it was kind of like running to catch a car that's already taking down the road.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I remember Frank Gambale, who I graduated 6 months before, great, tremendous guitar player, said that when he joined Chick Corea's band, he said it was like running to catch a moving freight train.
Oof.
And Frank was already a world-class guitar player. He won Best Guitarist of the Year the fall of '83, and he's gone on to have an incredible career. But I think it's interesting that what you're talking about here is that sometimes if we leap before we're ready, we're going to kind of get the on-the-job training that we need anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't ready to be a music teacher back in 2021, and I did it anyway. I mean, I said, but now, I mean, I'm teaching students and I'm teaching third graders, elementary kids, and I'm also teaching adults and kids through the Tahoe Truckee School of Music. So that was huge. That was one of my goals when I got out here, is to be affiliated with the School of Music in town. And that happened through networking because they have their school sponsored open mic every Thursday in downtown Truckee. And yeah, it was an hour. I just got out of my car after traveling 8 hours from Park City, and that was the end of a week-long trip across the country to get from Raleigh to California. And about an hour after I parked my car in my friend's driveway, we both hopped in his car and we were at Cottonwood, which was the open mic. So that's how much I was prioritizing
Wow.
going to the open mic, and how much it was that important to me. Yeah, I mean, without the music, without teaching music, I wouldn't be here. And then also without the CD that this was my third CD that I did. Definitely the first CD I did, I wasn't ready. Second one, a little bit better. And third one, I added a lot. I invited a lot more musicians, piano, banjo, violin, and still a lot to learn. But I was really proud of that CD, which is Skirts in the Snow. And it's comprised of 12 songs, 12 original songs about the women of the Donner Party. And the Donner Party took place here 170, it'll be 77 years ago
Yeah.
in Truckee.
Modern American tragedy. I want to get back to that in a minute because if somebody goes to your webpage, and I got to tell you, I did this morning, and I click on this, and it says Alice Osborn, and it says manuscript editor, book writing coach, and I have to look at writing services, testimonials, subscribe to my newsletter, and oh, by the way, if you go over here, it says about Alice, and it starts talking about music. So you've had quite a career in addition to that. And I'd like to, if we could, detour a little bit to college because you've got a couple of degrees. And I suspect that there are some of the folks that are watching or listening to this podcast that are going to have, you know what, this kind of resonates with me because you had a non-musical education background in terms of post-secondary, right? Would you agree with that?
Right. I was a finance major at Virginia Tech with
Wow.
a lot of classes in marketing.
Interesting. And
Lots
did
of
you
classes
just
in
at
marketing.
this point, you just weren't doing anything really with music at that time?
Nope. Nope, not at all. I wanted to be in the army at that point. I was 17 and I wanted to be a ranger and shoot people.
You know, we have a son who's a U.S. Army Ranger, which is an incredibly, incredibly difficult thing. But it looks like as I look at just your background and all this, that you have a tendency to jump on really big icebergs and climb them, just personally and professionally. Would you say that that's true?
I think so. I mean, I just decided to start downhill skiing a month ago, and I'm at the intermediate level. So I went, and skiing has so many metaphors for life and my life. I mean, and everything. And downhill skiing because cross country is flat. So I went and I went on a blue run, which is in Lake Tahoe kind of steep, I think. And I fell the first couple runs, and then the third run, I did it. But it was all mental. It was just, and I had taken lessons that morning before and did the whole run. I was really, really proud of myself. And it's
Wow.
new. That's a new skill. I mean, yeah, I did it 20 years ago, and that was in West Virginia. But here, this is the Sierra Nevada, and this is a big deal. And this is the Palisades Mountain, which was the Squaw Valley 1960 Olympics mountain. So yeah, that's kind of a big deal. So it's not just a baby mountain; it's a real mountain.
You know, one of the things that I find interesting about all of this is that you have a tremendous sense of, it's almost like the Abraham Maslow self-actualization, because I see a lot of that based on all your work and just all kinds of things. It's kind of like, I want to do this, now I want to do that, now I want to do this, now I want to do that. You mentioned majoring in finance at Virginia Tech, and then after that, another degree from where?
NC State. I graduated in 2006, and it was my
Wolfpack. That was where I started my college, so I know pretty
yeah.
good bit about that.
Oh yeah, it's
And
good.
that, but that was a different major altogether, right?
Right. So that was my master's in English, rhetoric, and composition. So I use my master's degree every day. Oh, and by the way, my websites have changed. So it's aliceosborn.com for the writing and Alice Osborn Music for the music.
Okay, that explains that. I have a voiceovers webpage as well as my music webpage, so I completely get that. But you had quite a career as not just a writer, but an editor, in addition to being a songwriter, right?
Well, I started editing pretty much after I graduated in '06. So I still edit. I finished up a book not too long ago. I don't edit like 5 books a month like I used to and not sleep at all. But my songwriting came about 2015, and I it was funny because it was my last poetry book in 2015, and my goal was to sing at my book launch. So in back in May, I uh, decided that the date of my book launch would be September 21st. I booked the place. And then I said, okay, now from between May to September, I need to learn how to play guitar and write 3 songs and sing them. So
You
I
know,
did.
there are going to be a lot, there'll be a lot of people that listen to or watch this that go, wow, this is really impressive. And I think the thing that a lot of our listeners will resonate with is the fact that you kind of had another career or another few careers and decided later on, you know, I want to do something with. I have a guitar student who just retired from a major organization that's now going out and playing solo gigs. And I
Yeah.
think that regardless of whatever your background is, if you have a desire to get out there and mix it up musically with other people, there's probably going to be an audience for it. And you're probably going to do better at it than you think you might.
Yes. I mean, it was, in even during the pandemic, my first gig on the, real live gig, because I was doing live streams on Facebook from March till June. And then my first real gig was in New Bern, and it was live. And they said, "Oh, you don't have to wear a mask. We're inside." Okay. I said, "Can I be outside, please?" But it's so funny because here in California, they're still worried about COVID. And I said, and I just like to bring up and kind of put a little needle in there. I said, my first live music gig was June 2020. Hey.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm glad to hear you say that because I'm here in North Texas. I'm actually in a town called Frisco, about 28 miles north of Dallas. And I think I took maybe 1 or a month and a half off. And then I played the rest of 2020. There were a lot of Texans that kind of thumb their nose down at that, and it's interesting because I see that there's still wide kinds of reactions. So let's talk about so the book launch or the poetry launch was the first time you did a solo performing gig with guitar and vocal. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think that was the start. And then I had something else maybe after that. And then in 2016 was when I started at the Western Wake Farmers Market in April, and I had to buy a Roland cube because they didn't have any electrical power. So that was my very first farmer's market gig. And I still have that Roland cube, which I brought over as my monitor for from back east. So I brought that guy over, and I used it this summer at several farmers market gigs that I booked over the summer. So here in locally. So that was pretty neat that I was using the same equipment that I did way back in 2016.
You know,
Seven.
one of the things that I've talked to several folks about this is gear, and we'll probably get to that in a little bit. But you know, it's interesting. I just picked up an Electro Voice Everse that doesn't require power, and so a lot of places where I used to say, "Hey, I need to have power within 10 or 15 feet of where I am," I don't need that anymore, and it's marvelous. There's a guy here that plays at a local Sprouts grocery store, and he just sets up in the parking lot. He's a sax player. He just plays sax with tracks against with one of those little rolling cubes, and it works beautifully. It's also interesting you mentioned about farmers markets. Can you talk about playing farmers markets for a moment?
Sure. So I would play the Western Wake Farmers Market from April to I would say I think the last one was November, and then the next year I became the coordinator of all the bookings for that market. So I found music. 2016, I also joined the North Carolina Songwriters Co-op as I became a member, and shortly thereafter that in 2017, I became the membership coordinator to network and to know everybody. And then in 2019, I became the president. So it was really just a way of for me to elevate myself and to meet people, and that was I thought that was a good career move. But the farmers market, that one was, which was by the airport, so we would have to compete with air traffic. But it it wasn't really, it was really nice because there was electric power and it was 2 hours, and it was you got $20, and it was very nice setup. I didn't think it was the most crowded, and then I spread my wings at other farmers markets, and then I learned about tip jars. You got to have the tip jar uh, either next to you if you're playing, or have the tip jar stand closest to the aisle in, because people don't want to walk up to you. Because I think there was one where it was 15 feet away from me, and it worked, and people put it because they didn't want to walk toward me, they didn't want to walk the extra 8 feet. So I always had to move it toward them, and I learned the hard way because that was the difference between $8 versus 40. So I had to move that one around. I also learned about playing in the cold because nobody wanted to play in the cold at Wake Forest Farmers Market, which was my very last farmers market. And they loved me there because I would play in 32-degree weather. And then I would post those pictures to my friends in Trekkie, and they said, "Man, she's tough. She's ready for winter here." So, and I would play in the dark, no lights. I'd play anywhere. I mean, so I became known as the person, "Hey, Alice will do it. Nobody else will." But that's kind of my thing. I work full time at a grocery store, a high end grocery store, and I have 3 days. I'm a bartender, and we're trying to get live music, trying really hard to get live music there, and it's a perfect space. So that's one of my goals, to get my friends in there, get myself in there, and as a solo or duo venue, and then. On the days I'm not bartending, I float in the store. So I've done expiration date checks. I've done stocking cans, and my last one was working the big registers at the front where you have to do all the big registers, and then bagging. And I also did all the taking all the carts out of the corrals and then putting them in the store, wearing a road vest at night, hoping I didn't get run over. And that was a lot of fun. But a lot of people don't like to do those jobs, and I said, job security, multiple degrees, multiple streams of income, and multiple things at work. And then they would have sent me home actually because they're cutting hours, but because I had that skill, I was able to do that. I also had the skills in the summer. They were cutting hours. I was a tour guide this summer, and I had retail experience, and I told them that, and I was able to keep my job. Now that would have been really bad, to come all the way to California, and you think you're having doing a full-time job, and then they say, "Actually, you're not. It's just 2 days a week." And I'm like, that wasn't quite what I thought. But because I have all these skills, and I've done makeup, I've done uh, everything pretty much. Retail. I was a retail manager, so I advocated for myself, and I was able to have work at the gift shop, work at 2 gift shops, and be a tour guide this summer.
This is uh, this is really interesting. I think one of the things that I like about your attitude is that unlike some of us that might be guilty of making excuses, well, I can't do this gig because of this, or I can't do that. Your attitude is pretty much, hey, I can do this, I can do that, I can do anything, and that's really impressive. And I think that hopefully one of the big takeaways that I hope everybody gets out of our podcast today is that if you want to do something, just make a way and make it happen, right?
Make it happen. And I would go all across the state for $100. I would go to New Bern, I would go to Fayetteville, and at the very end of North Carolina career in music, it was mostly I didn't have I was so excited when I would have a local gig, but that was 30 miles away in Chapel Hill. Or I would have something in Durham, which was 25 miles away. I was so excited about anything in Durham. I was like, oh, it's local. That paid. Usually the farmers markets were tips only, and I would go to Fayetteville, which was 90 minutes away. I would go to New Bern. So I did a lot of driving, and actually my car just turned 330,000 miles.
Wow.
But I did a lot of driving, and actually I would say that contributed to the breakup of my marriage because I was away a lot, and my husband at the time did not want to accompany me on my musical journey. So that was uh, yeah, I mean physically and metaphorically too. So that was something that I recognized. Well, we're not on the same path, but he didn't like me being away all the time. But that's what you have to do when you're playing music. You can't sit at home.
No, it's really difficult to do. I admire somebody like Daryl Hall who just builds a big barn at his place and has everybody come to his place because he doesn't have to travel anymore. But he traveled for probably 30 something years before that, and he's still on tour from time to time. So
Yeah.
I get that you're absolutely right. So one of the other things that I wanted to discuss when you perform live now, is it mostly just guitar and vocal? Do you do some of these allied instruments as well?
It's just guitar and vocal. And if I can get my keyboard player, John, to come to the gig, that will make things even better. So we're having a practice session today. We have a gig coming up in Truckee at the location where open mic is, Cottonwood, and that's happening next week. So today will be a practice day right after the morning is done. So that's really, really important. We've been working on new songs and new material, and I just wrote a new song, and I had been blocked for a while, just well, survival tech, survival, getting a new job
Sure.
3 times this summer, big life change. So little things like that.
Absolutely. And that all of that kind of thing adds up. When you play now, would you say that 100% of what you do is original material, 75%, 50%? What's the breakup? Do you do any copy stuff or cover stuff?
Probably I have more originals than I used to, so maybe it's around 60-40, maybe 70, I don't know, but it's a lot of originals, and I don't do the 3-hour gigs as much as I used to, because then you have to fill it in with more songs. And honestly, I've been doing more originals, and I've been forgetting a lot of my cover songs, so that's why this practice is really, really important. That's the thing that I don't like to, like, darn it, I forgot my songs. But they're the cover songs, they're not my originals. And then there's some originals I haven't even touched in years, and I would have to go back and really listen to them, and go back and redo them. But I don't know if I want to play them because I've changed. They're not my favorites. I mean, some originals will stay forever that are old, and some I'm gonna have to let them go because they don't
Yeah.
represent me anymore. Because I used to write songs about other people, and now I write songs about myself that are really personal.
Interesting. I've heard people say that songwriting is the best and cheapest therapy in the world, especially if your emotional baggage goes platinum.
Yeah.
So another question about that: when you play solo, you're playing a solo gig and just playing guitar and singing. Do you use anything like a looper, or do you use backing tracks, or drum machine, or kick a porch board, or any of those kinds of things?
The only thing I had was a harmonizer.
Okay.
I would use a harmonizer. I never quite got into the looping. I got into it, and then life happened, and then I had to let it go. I think another song came up, and then I put priority on the song, learning my new song over the looping. So it went that way.
Marvelous. Do you ever deal with writer's block as a songwriter?
Oh yeah. So that was my whole year last year. I was like, I was writing songs so well up until when I left for California. I wrote 10 new songs. And that was my goal. It's like 12 new songs. And then it kind of made it around six that were really good. And then I thought I would have a ton of time to get my songs together this summer and working full time, learning the area and just dealing with life. And then I got roommates after 2 months of living by myself. And then that was wonderful. They were great people, but you couldn't, I felt weird about practicing, and it was, yeah, they said, oh, we don't mind you practicing. Well, listen, I'm like, I don't really want you to listen because it's awkward. But yeah, it was harder than I thought. And then I moved to a new place in October, and fortunately I did go to the Yosemite songwriting retreat, and that was 3 days, and I got a lot of good material from that. And I got some great mentor sessions, and I'm going to attend the online version, the Yosemite Songwriting Retreat next Saturday, and I have a new song ready. But it took forever because it's a personal song, and I just was dealing with just the whole subject matter. It was, and then I finally got it, but it was really hard.
Some songs are more difficult to write than others, I'm sure.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I got it. So I just pushed through, and I'm really proud of it. I don't know if people like it. Doesn't matter to me because I like it. So,
Wonderful. Well, again, and music is a form of self-expression, right?
yes,
And
yes.
if
And I
you've
like
got
that.
things that you have to express, I think music is probably one of the great ways to do it, because chances are good if you feel a certain way about something, somebody else might also.
Right. And my song Rattlesnakes, it's a true story. And then what was really funny was about a relationship I had, and then it became about a relationship I had later. Like it was actually about, now it's about two relationships. And my song Limbo is the same thing. It was written about, guy one, and then it became guy two song. Same thing. I mean, it was like, how did that happen? How did it morph? Oh my gosh, I'm dating the same guy. That's not that's toxic. Okay. Like, well, I need to break this pattern, but it makes really good songs.
Well, yeah, yeah. They, again, sometimes the most difficult situations make the most interesting songs, certainly. So, a couple of other things. You mentioned that you've already recorded 3 CDs. First of all, the very first CD, what prompted that? And what made you just decide, you know what, I'm just going to record a CD regardless of, the time or the effort or the cost or anything? And how did you actually make that happen?
I can't remember, it was at Emerge, which Emerge was a recording studio slash art gallery slash stage space that was in downtown Raleigh. It's since gone away. COVID took it away, but it was, I think they had a deal like for $500, 5 hours, you could record 5 songs. I took the deal and I did it. And it was a really, really good learning experience. And then I could have CDs. I still have those CDs. I bought too many of them. And then the next one was Searching for Paradise, where this is crazy. There's a cover on the cover. It's a really beat up old backboard wagon that looks like it could have been from 1870s. And on my way to teach the kids ukulele, there's a wagon on the right side of the road that looks exactly like my album cover. I'm like, okay, we can't make that one up. So that was pretty cool. And there were 3 songs about the Donner Party on that album. They were folk songs about Amelia Earhart. I had one about Trail of Tears. So they weren't personal songs, they were folk songs about other people. And then Searching for Paradise was the uh, was birthed from the 3 songs that were on the previous album, and I decided I want to write a whole album about the women of the Donner Party. And folks made fun of me, and they said, you can't do it, that's a really silly project. And then in 2020 I was in charge as the songwriting president. I was in charge of making sure our Zoom meetings still happened because nobody else wanted to do it, and for me that was the only way to build community. And I had to come up with new songs because I was also part of the group, and that's how the songs took place. So they listen, people listened to the songs, and some of them were like, this is weird. Oh, I guess we have to listen to her because she's the president. So I mean, it wasn't easy. And then I got the songs almost done, and then I didn't move to Truckee, but I visited Truckee because it was a big commemoration of the rescue party that first rescued the Donner Party 4.5 months after their initial entrapment. And there was a big commemoration, and there were four extreme athletes who recreated the actual trail. They actually walked the trail, hiked the trail, that the survivors took and the rescuers took. And it was huge. And I got to meet everybody. I played my music, and everyone loved me in California. I said, well, shoot, why am I not getting this love in North Carolina? Everyone was like, we love you. And I said, but you haven't listened to my songs yet. And it doesn't matter. We love you. I'm like, okay. And
It's really
that's still the case.
interesting.
That's still the case. It hasn't changed. I thought it was a one-off, and then they invited me back in September that year, and then after that trip, I said, I think I really need to move because I don't feel appreciated in North Carolina. Of course, people said,
It's
"Oh, you're appreciated," but I didn't feel it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Since I was a small boy, I'd always wanted to go to California. I couldn't explain it, couldn't put my finger on it. And finally, in 1983, I went to Los Angeles. I
Hmm.
was engaged to be married, my wife, and attended what was at the time called the Guitar Institute of Technology, or GIT. It was on Hollywood Boulevard, right there in downtown Hollywood. And they changed the name of the school halfway through the year to Musicians Institute. But we had a marvelous time. We were in California for 4 years. We were in Hollywood up in the Beechwood Canyon area for the first year, and then Granada Hills for 3 years after that. And it was really interesting because I found that the things that I liked doing and the things that were enjoyable to me were, for the most part, resonated with people there. And that was also one of the reasons that my wife and my family and I moved here to Frisco, Texas in 1996, not having any idea how big it would become. Frisco at the time was an 18,000 population town with one middle school and one high school. It's now close to 250,000 people with 11 high schools.
Wow.
And we had no clue it was going to grow like that. But what was interesting is that I love both kinds of music, rock and country. And so I was fortunate we were able to come here, and I could play pretty much anything, and we were able to relocate to a place that was, in fact, I had two friends tell me when we were in Raleigh, this would have been the spring, summer of 96, they said, if you go to Texas and you can't make a living as a musician, you really can't make a living as a musician. And they were absolutely right. So it worked out well. So
Good.
now looking back on it, having made the move, um, was that a move in the right direction for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's everything, and then everything after that's been pretty much easy. As long as like the choices, I can see like when I make good choices, everything works. I got a gig at the Tahoe Truckee School of Music. I got a gig at the elementary school teaching ukulele. I'm living right at Lake Tahoe. Those kind of things just, and I have a great landlady. So uh, big things, little things. I have a great job. The team at the grocery store at Rayleigh's is really nice. I met the owners. I serve beer to the owner, and champagne to the other owner, and that all these things just seem to work. And I really love, um, just living here. Everyone's very authentic, and they wear their heart on their sleeve. And I I didn't feel that in North Carolina. So I don't want to diss North Carolina, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. There would be no way I had to get the training. I had to get the grad school training. But it was a lot of work. I mean, I have
Yeah.
to say it was, and was I happy? I don't know. I mean, I was happy when I would accomplish something, but I wasn't happy just being present. I was always like, I have to do more. I have to do more. I have to do more. And it was nice just to be just here and just look at the scenery and feel
Yeah.
peace. I want to say I was not at peace in North Carolina. It was always something, 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 something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the great things, you probably moved to one of the most beautiful places in the world, right? Reno
I
Lake Tahoe is
I
incredible,
did.
right?
I think a lot of people don't know about Tahoe. I'm like, how do you not know about Tahoe? Oh, my kids didn't know about Tahoe.
Yeah. 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 It's an amazing and a wonderful place. Let's revisit, or let's talk about this. You've had a fascination with the Truckee, with the Donner Party and all of that went down there. And what precipitated that? Because that's actually affected not only some of the songs and the CD that you've written, but also physically where you live. Where did that kind of resonate? Where did that come from, do you think?
Well, I think it found me and I found it. That's what I believe, that there's no coincidences. Everything just finds itself, and I was meant to find it. I was meant to do the research. I was meant to meet the descendants. I was meant to live here. I mean, it feels like it's all part of this plan. And to really understand the people of the Donner Party. I mean, I know that in North Carolina, people think, oh, they're cannibals, and I don't want to talk about it. It's a gross subject. But I changed things because now folks in North Carolina, they say, well, I remember Alice, and I remember that these are real people, and they were struggling, and um, and maybe somebody will tell somebody and say somebody, but and I had a really, really good newspaper article that was so well written and so on point of what the Donner Party represents to me, which is determination, uh, the the story of human resilience and strength, and it's also about a book. So the Donner Party started with a book and it ended with a book. Ended meaning ended the completion. So there's a little girl, Eliza Donner. She is the youngest of all the Donner family. She's 3 years old at the time. She's orphaned. Her mom and dad both died in the Donner Party, and she gets made fun of when she's a little kid. And they say, well, they make fun of her at school. And we've all related to that. That if you're something happened to you, all the kids gang up on you, and they kick you in class, and you have a kick me sign. Well, she had a big kick me sign, and she was a pretty outspoken kid, but she knew, how do I make this right? And she said, and she made a vow when she was 8 or 9 years old, and she said, when I'm grown, I'm gonna write the story, and I'm gonna tell the truth, so nobody's gonna trash my family's name. And she did, and she became a powerful person. She married a congressman. She met everybody that was famous at the time, presidents and kings and queens. I mean, she did all that, and she said, "Why are you meeting me?" And they said, "We're so happy to meet you. What you did." And it was the power of her words that were able to the truth. I mean, and that's what I studied in. That was my graduate thesis in grad school, which was the power of uh, telling your story and using feminist theory. And that's what she did from a woman's point of view. And it's incredible, her story. When she was little, she had to wear boys' clothes to rustle up cows. She almost got eaten by two boars. She had to slide under a fence. She had to leave a very toxic situation. She was going to be sex trafficked, she and her sister, and she managed to get out of that situation single-handedly. And the woman who was going to sex traffic her uh, went to the governor to make sure that she and her sister Georgia stayed put, because her aunt back east wanted to take the girls back east, and she had to. This was a powerful woman she had to fight, a powerful, toxic, narcissistic woman, and this little kid did it. So
Wow.
um, and so she's my hero, but that's also my story too, where you have adults that don't treat you right, and she was able to overcome that. And so that's the more I learn about her, learn about other people, women, men in the Donner Party. A lot of it's about my story, personal story too. And this is all stuff happens after the Donner Party, by the way. Everyone knows the story of how they survived and how they didn't have food and all that. But I like the stories after. How do you get over that trauma? How do you deal with people making fun of you at school? That's what I want to know.
This is fabulous. Pause this for a second. This ends part one of our interview with Alice Osborn. Once again, this is Riley Wilson for the Band of One podcast. If you like what we do, be sure and not only subscribe, but consider supporting our channel. And we'll see you next time. I'm Riley Wilson for the Band of One podcast. Goodbye.